our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune hailed the Algerian students striving for success with the ambition of those who are eager to contribute to the building of a strong and victorious Algeria. And the President of the Republic has affirmed that sustainable development in the Arab region must be based on the principle of solidarity with fellow Arab countries suffering the ravages of crises and wars. And Arab heads of state and government meeting in the Iraqi capital Baghdad has called on the international community to take up its legal and moral responsibilities and put pressure to end the bloodshed in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli occupation has intensified its operations in the Gaza Strip, claiming hundreds of lives over the past few days, despite the international calls for an end to the atrocities taking place in the Palestinian territory. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Assia Bakar. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has addressed a message on the occasion of the 69th anniversary of Students' Day, celebrated each year on May 19th. In his speech, the President of the Republic hailed the Algerian young students striving for success with the ambition of those who are eager to contribute to the building of a strong and victorious Algeria, following the footsteps of the pioneers of the past. He stressed that Algerian people are free and determined to remain free, and that nothing is more important than responding to the call for freedom in the immortal November 1st manifesto. President Tebboune recalled the various challenges the country is currently facing, notably in the field of education. He stressed that Algeria has been able to overcome difficult situations and build an honorable national university system with an integrated pedagogical framework, structures and facilities covering all parts of the country. The President also reiterated the state's keenness to further push the Algerian university and the training system at all levels and disciplines to link with the economic reality and the process of transformation towards a knowledge economy, and to establish mechanisms to integrate university youth and graduates of training institutes into the movement of these inevitable transformations towards an open, diversified and competitive economy. Meanwhile, the President of the Republic also congratulated Mustaqbal Wisat Football Club of Wergla on their historic promotion to Professional League One. The President also congratulated the supporters and technical staff of the two clubs on their historic promotion. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and President Abdelmajid Tebboune has affirmed that sustainable development in the Arab region must be based on the principle of solidarity with fellow Arab countries suffering the ravages of crises and wars, stressing that Algeria intends to be a key player in various initiatives aimed at strengthening inter-Arab cooperation in order to achieve economic integration. Mariam Borshi has the details.
This came in a speech read on his behalf by the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Hattaf, during the 5th session of the Arab Summit for Economic and Social Development held in Baghdad. He said sustainable development in the Arab region must be based on the principle of solidarity with the vulnerable countries of the Arab nation, starting with occupied Palestine, without forgetting the other brotherly Arab countries suffering the ravages of crises, conflicts and wars. The President of the Republic said the security and prosperity of the Arab region cannot be achieved without the recovery of these countries, an end to the injustices they suffer, and their return to the path of stability, development and prosperity, reiterating Algeria's support and commitment to contribute to the achievement of Arab economic integration. He stressed that the achievement of Arab economic integration must not remain a deferred dream passed down from generation to generation. He said intra-Arab trade, despite the growth recorded in recent years, does not exceed 8% of the total volume of trade between Arab countries and the rest of the world. The same is true for inter-Arab investments, whose figures remain below this level and reveal a glaring disparity between one country and another. The President of the Republic indicated that among the essential conditions for the achievement of Arab economic integration are the full implementation of the Greater Arab Free Trade Area (GAFTA), the development of inter-Arab transportation networks, as well as the creation of banking, financial and insurance mechanisms. He considered that the objectives of economic recovery and sustainable development are imperatives closely linked to the requirements of Arab national security and our responsibility to develop the potential of the Arab peoples for current and future generations. In the same context, the President of the Republic emphasized that Algeria intends to be a key player in various economic initiatives aimed at strengthening rapprochement, interactions and cooperation between Arab countries, recalling Algeria's membership in the GAFTA since 2009 and its contribution to the establishment of various Arab financing and investment institutions, in addition to its support for land, sea, air, and even energy interconnection projects. He emphasized the need for Arab states not to lag behind current revolutions, particularly in the fields of renewable energy, digitalization, and artificial intelligence, robotics, and nanotechnology.
Algeria renews its involvement and commitment to contributing to the achievement of Arab economic integration. In the same context, my country stresses the necessity for Arab states collectively not to lag behind the ongoing revolutions, especially in the fields of renewable energy, digitalization, artificial intelligence, robotics, as well as in the field of nanotechnology. Joint Arab action must allocate significant attention to these vital future fields, which require the concerted efforts, mobilization of capabilities, and pooling of our means so that we do not become among the marginalized nations.
That was the speech read on behalf of President Tebboune by the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Hattaf, during the 5th session of the Arab Summit for Economic and Social Development held in Baghdad.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and under the instructions of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Minister of Religious Affairs and Waqf or Endowments, Mr. Youssef Ben Mehdi, took part in the inaugural Mass of the Pontificate or of Pope Leo XIV at the Vatican. The Arab heads of state and government meeting in the Iraqi capital Baghdad has called on the international community to take up its legal and moral responsibilities and put pressure to end the bloodshed in the Gaza Strip. In a final declaration issued at the end of the Arab League summit meeting, they ruled out the idea of displacing the Palestinians and called for immediate end to be put to the Israeli acts of aggression on Gaza and to the continued violations that increase the suffering of the civilian population. In the so-called Baghdad Declaration, the Arab leaders reiterated their attachment to the Arab constant positions and their rejection of any forms of exodus of the Palestinian people. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and Arab leaders urged those influential states to do more to guarantee a safe and unhindered access to humanitarian aid into Gaza. In this connection, they stressed the importance of coordinating efforts to secure a reopening of all crossing points to allow in humanitarian aid into Gaza and enable the UN agencies, notably UNRWA, to carry through their mission. In this respect, the Arab heads of state and governments reiterated their full support to a fair, comprehensive and peaceful settlement of the Palestinian issue, which they made it clear remained a pivotal element contributing to the region's stability. The Arab leaders reaffirmed their full support to the Palestinian people's rights, including right to self-determination and to set up a sovereign state, as well as its right to return. They stressed that a solution must be based on the setting up of an independent Palestinian state within the 1967 borders. The Israeli army has intensified its operations in the Gaza Strip, claiming hundreds of lives over the past few days, despite the international calls for an end to the atrocities taking place in the Palestinian territory. According to the news agency Wafa, over 40 people, mainly women and children, were killed in the Israeli bombardments, which targeted various areas of the besieged enclave. Over 300 Palestinians have been killed and up to 800 others wounded over the past 3 days. And the representative of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, has praised Algeria's steadfast positions regarding the Palestinian cause. Mariam Bershi has the details.
Mr. Hamdad highlighted Algeria's unwavering support for the Palestinian cause under President Abdelmajid Tebboune, calling it a strong defense against regional normalization with Israel. He praised Algeria's official stance at the UN and international forums, affirming Hamas's commitment to upholding this position and emphasizing the deep ties existing between Palestinians and Algerians. He called for full support for Gaza and noted that Palestinians draw inspirations from Algeria's revolution, asserting that only force can reclaim what was taken by force. In this context, he also condemned the burning of displaced persons' tents as a brutal crime enabled by the US support for Israel. He criticized global silence and urged Arab and Islamic nations to act urgently to stop the massacres and support Palestinians against their displacement.
This targeting and burning of displaced persons' tents with innocent civilians inside is a recurring brutal crime that embodies the fascism of this government and of the criminal Netanyahu. These blatant violations of all international laws and norms fall under the direct responsibility of the American administration, which provides the terrorist occupation government with political and military cover, enabling this insane escalation, such as the targeting of innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip, including children, women and the elderly. We in Hamas denounce the state of silence and the incapacity with which the United Nations system, its institutions and the countries of the world are confronting these brutal crimes and unprecedented violations of all international laws and norms committed by the occupation army and its fascist government.
Mr. Hamdan reaffirmed that the Palestinian people who refuse submission and disappearance will continue their struggle until all their legitimate rights are regained.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The members of the UN Security Council have called for a permanent ceasefire in Libya, reaffirming their firm commitment to an inclusive Libyan-led and Libyan-controlled political process. Mr. Shofi has the details.
In a statement made by the press on the situation in Libya and adopted by consensus at the initiative of the United Kingdom and the A3+ group in the Council, Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Guyana, the members of the Security Council expressed their deep concern at the escalation of violence in Tripoli in recent days, with reports of civilian casualties. In this respect, they called on all parties to protect civilians while demanding that those responsible for attacks against civilians be held accountable. The council members hailed the reports of agreed truces and called for their unconditional observance and the conclusion of a permanent ceasefire. They also reaffirmed their firm commitment to an inclusive, Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process facilitated by the United Nations and to the unification of all institutions, including military and security institutions. The A3+ group also stressed the importance of urgent progress to be made to ensure lasting peace, stability and security for the Libyan people, reaffirming their support for the United Nations mission in Libya, UNMIL, and the efforts of the Special Representative of the Secretary General within this framework. They also reaffirmed their respect for Libya's sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity and national unity.
And to Romania now, people are going to polls to vote for their next president in what experts have claimed to be their most crucial election. Romanians are voting in a pivotal presidential runoff that could radically alter their country's strategic alignment and economic prospects. The Romanian contest will oppose an EU-critical and Trump-admiring populist against a centrist independent in a knife-edge vote that analysts have called most important in the country's post-communist history. George Simeon, a former soccer ultra and ultra-nationalist agitator who sees his far-right IUR party as a natural ally of the US MAGA movement, comfortably won the May 4 first round with a score of 41%, double that of the Bucharest mayor Nicol Sordan. Recent polls have shown the gap between the two candidates closing, with one putting them neck and neck and another placing Dan, who has described the vote as a battle between the pro-Western and an anti-Western Romania ahead. That's it, dear listeners, for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week.
the international event of the week.
As the Palestinians commemorated this week the Nakba, or catastrophe, marking their expulsion from their land, in 1948, scores of people were killed in violent bombardments across Gaza. Over 100 people, including 22 children and 15 women, died when the northern part of Jabalia was hit by the Israeli airstrikes. Several other Palestinians were killed this week in a massive Israeli airstrike on the European Hospitals compound in the southern town of Khan Yunis. The continued violence came as a final warning was issued by the Israeli occupying authorities ordering the evacuation of Jabalia and its neighboring areas. Other evacuation orders were also issued for other parts of the northern areas of Gaza City. Ask if parallels could be drawn between the crimes that were committed in 1948 and the violent action that the Israeli occupying forces have been carrying out in Palestine since October 7, 2023. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi has this to say.
I think it is best if we view what is happening in Gaza today as a continuation of what began as Nakba in 1948. For the Palestinians, the Nakba never ended. It is a daily reality since the occupation began in 1948, and some could go back to 1917. In 1948, when the Zionists drove Palestinians from their homes during the Nakba, 750,000 people fled from their home with a promise they would return. Many of them went to Gaza because it was close to home, close enough to return when things went normal as they hoped. Historians and survivors tell us the Palestinians ran with nothing but keys, deeds, and the clothes they wore. In a matter of months following the Nakba in 1948, Gaza swelled with refugees. Its population tripled almost overnight and continued to grow every year and every decade. Generations grew up in exile, watching their ancestral home disappear behind fences and fires. When we look at Gaza today, you can easily say that the grandchildren of the Nakba are being bombed in that same place where their grandparents sought refuge. The very neighborhoods built by refugees are being flattened. The camps they lived in, Jabalia and Rafah, for example, are now targets, graves, ruins. What is happening in Gaza today is a continuation of the Nakba by new means, where villages were once emptied by gunfire in 1948. Entire city blocks are now vaporized by airstrikes. Where families once carried keys to locked doors, they now carry the names of their dead in the backs of ambulances, as one Palestinian martyr noted. For the Zionist occupiers, the goal has remained the same: remove the people, keep the land. Since October 7, 2023, the Israeli military has launched a second Nakba, turning Gaza into rubble, wiping off entire neighborhood from the map, putting hospitals off functions, shelling schools, and reducing them to ash. By their own words, Israeli officials have spoken of making Gaza uninhabitable, of needing to flatten the strip. This kind of talk dehumanized Palestinians just as it did in 1948, making it easier to justify extreme genocide. Then it was villages being emptied under fire. Now it's airstrikes, siege, and starvation.
This week, the UN's humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, condemned Israel's blockade of Gaza and warned against a potential genocide unless an action was immediately taken. Addressing a meeting of the UN Security Council, called for lifting of the 10-week-long blockade on Gaza, accusing the Israeli government of deliberately and unshamedly imposing inhumane conditions on civilians. He emphasized that silence and inaction are no longer options. The Israeli blockade has exacerbated the dire humanitarian crisis as it prevents the Palestinian population's access to food, fuel and medical care. According to the UN, the entire population was facing high levels of acute food insecurity, with 500,000 people facing starvation. The UN has recalled that Israel is obliged under the international law to provide food and medical supplies to the Palestinian population, which is almost lacking everything. In this respect, the UN Secretary-General urged the Security Council to take immediate action to prevent a humanitarian disaster. In a similar move, Algeria's representative to the UN, Tawfiq Koudri, called for decision action and stressed that the lives of countless civilians hang in the balance. Asked if the UN Security Council's members were likely to take action or take the risk of endangering more civilian lives who are already facing serious threats of famine, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi has the following.
The tragedy here is that despite the urgency, despite what we see, and despite what is reported, the Security Council has yet to take any meaningful action to stop the blockade imposed on Gaza, on the Palestinians by the Israelis. The core issue here, of course, lies in the United Nations Council structure. The 5 members hold veto power. And when it comes to Gaza, the United States has repeatedly exercised that veto or threatened to shield Israel from resolutions that might compel it to open borders for humanitarian relief or comply with international humanitarian law. Such justification, the justification is often given by the Western world and Security Council members that Israel has acted in self-defense, or it acts in self-defense. But this framing ignores the scale and nature of what's happening in Gaza. It ignores the fact that Israel is an occupier and its actions are in violation of international law. It ignores the many resolutions that the Security Council, the United Nations General Assembly, the court's ruling have made holding Israel culprit and responsible for what's happening. The destruction today, it ignores the destruction of civilian infrastructure, the targeting of aid convoys, and the documented denial of food and water to a trapped civilian population, which amount to a collective punishment. These are not abstract policy debates, whether Israel has the right to self-defense or not. These are conditions that lead to famine, and they are happening now, and the United Nations Security Council must act. The broader, even geopolitical context makes actions even harder when we look at what's happening in Gaza. Western countries, many of which have close military, economic, and political ties to Israel, are hesitant to support measures that could be seen as critical. Meanwhile, other global powers might support Gaza in rhetoric, but are often motivated more by rivalry with the West than by a genuine commitment to justice. The result is a deadlock, a Security Council divided not by principle, but by politics. And even as we've seen in some cases, when the Council does speak, it is always diluted in ways designed to secure consensus. Strong resolutions are watered down, calls for accountability are softened into appeals for restraint. What emerges is language that offends no one and protects no one, while the Palestinians continue to suffer. What's happening in Gaza is not inevitable. It is a natural disaster. It is not a natural disaster. It is the consequences of choices to blockade, to bomb, to withhold aid. And at the center of it is Israel. Israel and then must be held responsible for what's happening. And the United Nations Security Council must take actions, not just rhetoric.
As heavy bombardments continued to hit Gaza, President Trump stated in Qatar the second leg of his tour of Gulf countries that he has concept for Gaza, whereby the United States will take Gaza and turn it into what he called a freedom zone once it's rebuilt. He made the remark during a business roundtable in Qatar. This is not the first time that President Trump has put forward ideas about the future of the Palestinian territory. Last January, he told reporters that Gaza's inhabitants be relocated in Egypt and Jordan, suggesting to strip the territory of its population. The proposal was firmly rejected by the two countries and strongly condemned by the international community as a tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Asked if President Trump's reiterated proposal is the core of the plan being implemented by the Israeli government as advocated by some of its far-right members seeking the annexation of the occupied Palestinian territories, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
It has been a sort of a norm for President Donald Trump to announce a solution to the Middle East, often without consent or consultation of the people most affected, that is, the Palestinians. Also, it is typical for President Donald Trump to make statements in favor of Israel, reinforcing his unconditional support for the Jewish states. From the 2020 deal of the century, which proposes economic incentives in place of political rights for Palestinians, to now claiming he would unilaterally take Gaza, Trump has a vision that reflects a mindset that sees Palestinian statehood and territory not as a matter of Palestinians or a right for the Palestinians to determine their own self-determination, but as assets to be procured, reassigned, and branded, all to satisfy the Jewish state and also his public relations brand of politics. What is particularly dangerous for his statement in Doha is its imperial overtone and flagrant violation of international law. Under the United Nations Charter, no nation has the legal authority to seize territory that does not belong to it. Gaza, for all its suffering, remains a Palestinian land. It is not a blank state, nor a geopolitical sandbox for superpower experimentation. The Fourth Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits the forcible transfer or annexation of occupied territory. For President Trump to speak of taking Gaza, regardless of the stated intent, flirts, to put it really mildly, with the language of conquest, a vocabulary that international law has sought to outlaw since the aftermath of the Second World War II. President Donald Trump doesn't seem to factor that in his perspective, nor he wants to.
This week, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, warned that starvation was spreading in Gaza and that the people would die, not because of the bombardments, but of the lack of food unless aid entered the enclave in the coming weeks.
إذاعة الجزائر الدولية